Something just happened that barely made the news, but if you connect the dots, it changes how you look at silver overnight. Samsung quietly revealed progress on a new battery design. Not a flashy keynote, not a consumer announcement, just enough information for the right people to notice. And buried inside it is silver, not as decoration, not as a trace element, as a functional, performance-critical component. That's the part that should make you stop for a second. Because when a company like Samsung builds silver into next-generation battery tech, they're not guessing. They're not experimenting for fun. They're locking in future demand. And battery demand doesn't scale slowly, it explodes. I want you to think about how this actually works in the real world. When a tech giant commits to a new chemistry, it's not about one product. It's about entire supply chains retooling, factories redesigned, contracts signed years in advance. Silver doesn't get tested at that level, it gets consumed. What makes this uncomfortable is how out of sync the silver market still feels. Price barely reacts. Commentators shrug. Most people don't even notice. But the physical system notices, because batteries aren't jewelry. They aren't optional. They're infrastructure now. Phones, grid storage, electric vehicles, defense systems, backup power for data centers. Every one of those categories is growing at the same time. And batteries sit at the center of all of it. Here's the part most people miss. Battery technology doesn't adopt materials casually. Anything added has to justify itself on performance, durability, and efficiency. Silver doesn't get included unless it solves real problems. Conductivity, heat management, energy density, longevity. Once it's in, it tends to stay in. That's why this matters so much more than a headline suggests. This isn't speculative investor demand chasing a narrative. This is industrial demand being engineered into the future. And unlike investors, industry doesn't sell into rallies. It takes delivery. Now zoom out for a second. Silver already has one foot in almost every modern technology: solar, electronics, medical devices, military hardware. The system was already tight. Now imagine battery demand stacking on top of that. Not gradually, exponentially. This is where the word supply starts to feel very theoretical. Because silver supply doesn't respond like tech demand. You don't spin up new mines just because engineers found a better battery design. Most silver comes as a byproduct: copper mines, zinc mines, lead mines. That means silver production is stuck piggybacking on other markets that have their own cycles and constraints. So when demand surges unexpectedly, the system can't stretch. It fractures. That's why this feels like a pressure event, not a trend. Samsung didn't just drop a product idea. They signaled a direction. And other companies are watching closely, because nobody wants to be behind on energy storage. Once competitors follow, demand doesn't double, it multiplies. Here's where paper silver starts to look fragile. The pricing system assumes silver mostly sits around, trades hands, moves between vaults. Battery silver doesn't come back. It's embedded, locked inside devices, scattered across millions of units. Recycling sounds good until you look at the economics. Tiny amounts, complex extraction, high costs. A lot of that silver is effectively gone. That's the kind of drain spreadsheets don't model well. So while futures markets trade contracts back and forth, the physical metal is being permanently removed from circulation. That gap can stay hidden for a while, until someone asks for delivery. This is why industrial users don't wait for confirmation. They don't trust just-in-time supply anymore. They secure metal early. They sign long contracts. They build buffers. And that behavior alone tightens the market further. You won't hear panic. You'll hear silence. Silence is how real shortages begin. What's fascinating is how the mainstream still frames silver as underperforming, as if it's failing some test. But silver isn't trying to perform for traders. It's being drafted into service by engineers. That's a different role. And once a metal becomes strategic, price stops being the main decision factor. Availability becomes everything. Think about what happens if battery makers can't get silver. Production delays, missed targets, regulatory pressure, national security concerns. At that point, price is secondary. That's when financial pricing mechanisms tend to break, not because of conspiracy, but because they were built for a different era, an era where silver demand was cyclical and flexible. We're not in that era anymore. Energy storage is a political priority now, a military priority, an economic priority, and silver just got pulled deeper into that orbit. This is why I'm paying attention to this Samsung development, not because it guarantees anything, but because it confirms a direction that was already forming. Silver is moving from investment metal to industrial bottleneck. That transition doesn't show up cleanly on charts. It shows up in procurement behavior, and that behavior is changing. If you're wondering why inventories don't seem to match the narrative, this is why. Inventory numbers don't tell you what's spoken for. They don't tell you what's locked into future contracts. They don't tell you what's already designed into products not yet built. By the time it's visible, it's usually late. History is full of examples like this. Materials that looked abundant right up until demand turned structural. Uranium, oil, rare earths. The The story is always the same: slow buildup, quiet accumulation, then a sudden realization that the buffer is gone. I'm not saying this happens tomorrow or next month. I'm saying the ingredients are now undeniable. Silver demand is no longer just monetary or ornamental, it's technological. And technology doesn't retreat once it commits. If you take nothing else from this, remember this part. Markets don't break when everyone is excited. They break when assumptions quietly stop matching reality. Right now, the assumption is that silver is plentiful enough, liquid enough, replaceable. Battery tech like this challenges that assumption. And once enough industries act on that challenge, the system has to adapt, usually abruptly. This isn't about hype. It's about noticing when something crosses a threshold. Samsung didn't cause a silver crisis, but they may have confirmed one direction of travel. Silver isn't just being invested in anymore. It's being engineered into the future. And once that happens, the conversation around supply, price, and availability never really goes back to normal.